Hi guys. Basically what I'm going to do is read this passage out loud as I would read it if I were taking the test. So I'm not going to explain what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, why. I'm just going to read it and do a little bit of thinking out loud, what I would be thinking in my head as I read through passage 1 on this SAT. So here we go. The first thing that I would do is look at the questions. You have to have a purpose for reading. If you just start reading, you have no idea what you're looking for or what is important. So you just want to quickly go through the questions. So question 1. Which choice best summarizes the passage? Okay, we're pretty much going to have to read through this whole thing for me to be able to understand that. So question 2. A main theme of the passage is that, again, I won't be able to answer that question until I've read a good majority of the passage. Number 3, throughout the passage, here we go again, the narrator is portrayed as someone who is, okay, so I'm thinking I'm going to be paying attention to what the narrator is like throughout the passage, what he or she does, what he or she says, so how the narrator is portrayed. And then number 4, it can be most reasonably inferred from the passage that old Widow Lau's reluctance to stay for tea is, okay, so it's not maybe going to come right out and say it because of that word inferred, so we kind of have to read between the lines. But anywhere I see old Widow Lau's, and if I see anything about staying for tea, I'm going to be marking up the text. And then finally, let's look at number 5 before we start reading. Which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? So as I'm looking for old Widow Lau's name and tea, I'm going to be marking it so that I can answer 4 and 5 at the same time. The text is small, so read along in your own copy of the passage. At last, old Widow Lau was done haggling with the driver, and we stepped inside Father's shop. It was north-facing, quite dim inside, and perhaps this was why Father did not see us at first. He was busy with a customer, a man who was distinguished-looking, like the scholars of 2 decades before. The 2 men were bent over a glass case, discussing the different qualities of ink sticks. Big Uncle welcomed us and invited us to be seated. From his formal tone, I knew he did not recognize who we were. So I called his name in a shy voice, and he squinted at me, then laughed and announced our arrival to Little Uncle, who apologized many times for not rushing over sooner to greet us. They rushed us to be seated at one of 2 tea tables for customers. Old Widow Lau refused their invitation 3 times, exclaiming that my father and uncles must be too busy for visitors. She made weak efforts to leave. On the 4th insistence, we finally sat. Then Little Uncle brought us hot tea and sweet oranges, as well as bamboo latticework fans with which to cool ourselves. So I'll stop there, and I'm going to do a little thinking out loud. So thinking back to the questions that we looked at before we started reading, I know that old Widow Lau is mentioned first on line 1, and I'm not exactly sure what is meant by haggling with the driver. I'm assuming maybe a taxi cab. And it looks like the narrator, obviously, is the daughter or son. I'm not sure yet, because the narrator says father's shop. And then as we kind of go and look down, let's see where... On line 15, it says, Old Widow Lau refused their invitation 3 times, exclaiming that my father and uncles must be too busy for visitors. She made weak efforts to leave. On the fourth insistence, we finally sat. So at this point, you should be able to go back and answer question 4 and 5. So go ahead and look to see if you can answer those. So before I would continue reading, I'd go ahead and look at question 6 and maybe question 7. But I think I'm going to focus on 6 before I start reading again. The narrator indicates that the contrast between the ink-making studio at Immortal Heart Village and her family's ink shop is that the ink shop, okay, so the narrator basically states in the passage that the difference between the studio, so I'm going to be looking for that Immortal Heart Village when I go back to read, and her family's shop. And we're focusing on, the last part says, is that the ink shop. So that's what we'll focus on. Let's go back and see what we find. So line 22, that's paragraph 2. I tried to notice everything so I could later tell Gao Ling what I had seen and tease her out of envy. The floors of the shop were of dark wood, polished and clean, no dirty footprints, even though this was during the dustiest part of the summer, and along the walls were display cases made of wood and glass. The glass was very shiny and not one pane was broken. Within those glass cases were our silk-wrapped boxes, all our hard work. They looked so much nicer than they had in the ink-making studio at Immortal Heart Village. Okay, so there, right there, I would go right back to question 6, because that is where Immortal Heart Village is mentioned, and she was just comparing her father's studio to that one. So you should find the answer. Do process of elimination. Look at the questions and the answer choices and try to figure out which ones are wrong first. So basically, I'm using a strategy called chunking. We read some questions, we read a little of the passage, and go back and forth. So let's look at number 7. Based on the artistic philosophy expressed in the 4th paragraph, it is reasonable to infer that precious Auntie would consider a hastily written first draft of a story to be, let's see, okay, so precious Auntie evidently has an opinion about art. It says artistic philosophy, so her thoughts on art. Let's see, and she's going to be talking about it in the 4th paragraph, and I don't know, it sounds like maybe something might be compared to that. We're going to have to figure it out. And then number 8 is where we're going to have to identify the exact couple of lines that will support how precious Auntie would view a hastily written first draft. Basically something that you guys do a lot of times, right? You write your first draft and think, oh no, it's perfect. Well, and precious Auntie would, let's see what she would think of that first draft that you submit without going back and revising it. Let's go ahead also and take a look at question 9, because we're also going to be reading line 59 when we read paragraphs 3 and 4. As used in line 59, matches most nearly means. Now remember, please do not answer this question based on just the word. Probably at least 3 of the 4 answer choices are going to be synonyms for matches. So any of them could be correct technically, but it's how it's used in the passage. So we'll have to look at the text, the context clues around that word, maybe 2 or 3 sentences above it, and so forth. I saw that Father had opened several of the boxes. He set sticks and cakes and other shapes on a silk cloth covering a glass case that served as a table on which he and the customer leaned. First he pointed to a stick with a top shaped like a ferry boat and said with graceful importance, "Your writing will flow as smoothly as a keel cutting through a glassy lake." Okay, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but that's okay. Line 40, he picked up bird shape. "Your mind will soar into the clouds of higher thought." He waved toward a row of ink cakes embellished with designs of peonies and bamboo. "Your ledgers will blossom into abundance while bamboo surrounds your quiet mind." Okay, definitely using a lot of literary devices there. Hopefully when we go back to the questions, we'll see what that means, but from what we read, I'm not really sure that information is going to be necessary to truly understand. So we'll go to line 46, paragraph 4. As he said this, precious Auntie came back into mind. I was remembering how she taught me that everything, even ink, had a purpose and a meaning. Good ink cannot be the quick kind, ready to pour out of a bottle. You can never be an artist if your work comes without effort. Okay, I'd be underlining that. That kind of sounds important. She's thinking that if you're just going to do it real quick without meaning, it's not going to be very good if you're doing it without much effort. That is the problem of modern ink from a bottle. You do not have to think. You simply write what is swimming on the top of your brain, and the top is nothing but pond scum, dead leaves, and mosquito spawn. Okay, yuck. I can actually picture that. I lived in Indiana, and I saw small ponds that had the nasty stuff floating around top of it. So yeah, those thoughts in your head that are real quick, and that's not looking too good there. Okay, precious Auntie is definitely opinionated. But when you push an ink stick along an ink stone, you take the first step to cleansing your mind and your heart. You push and you ask yourself, what are my intentions? What is in my heart that matches my mind? Okay, so precious Auntie definitely has an opinion there. And then that word matches on line 59. What are my intentions? What is in my heart that matches my mind? So I would cross out matches and what might fit there. What is in my heart that is also in my mind, or that is similar to what is in my mind, or what is in my heart and mind, maybe at the same time, or on a similar thought pattern, what I feel, what I think along the same way. Hopefully we'll find an answer choice that matches something along those lines. So go ahead and look at those questions again, 7, 8, and 9, now that we read those sections. And before we read the rest, we'll look at number 10. As used in line 68, clean most nearly means. All right, so we'll do the same thing. We'll cross it out and see what words might work. I remembered this, and yet that day in the ink shop, I listened to what Father was saying, and his words became far more important than anything precious Auntie had thought. Look here, Father said to his customer, and I looked. He held up an ink stick and rotated it in the light. See? It's the right hue, purple, black, not brown or gray like the cheap brands you might find down the street. And listen to this. And I heard a sound as clean and pure as a small silver bell. So I heard a sound as, special, unique and pure, clear and pure, simple, stands out, different, special and pure, something like that, we'll see. The high-pitched tone tells you that the soot is very fine, as smooth as the sliding banks of old rivers. And the scent, can you smell the balance of strength and delicacy, the musical notes of the ink's perfume? Expensive, and everyone who sees you using it will know that it was well worth the high price. I was very proud to hear Father speak of our family's ink that way. So go ahead and see if you can answer question 10. And now that you've read the entire passage, you should be able to go back to questions 1, 2, and 3, and if not find the answer, hopefully at least cross out a few of them and get it narrowed down to just 1 or 2, and hopefully you'll have a gut feeling about those. I will do a video again, or we'll do it in class where I will give you the correct answers and show you exactly where the evidence or proof is as to which answer choice is correct for each question, and also where the evidence is that the other answer choices are wrong. I hope this helped.